What is witchcraft? There is hardly a word in the English language that has been so misunderstood over the ages as the mysterious word witchcraft and witch. To begin with, witch comes from the Anglo-Saxon Wicca. Wicca is the craft of the wise. A Witchcraft practitioner then becomes a witchcraft practitioner. Originally, witchcraft was the old religion of the Stone Age people living in Western Europe, particularly the British Isles and Scandinavia. It was their only religion and based upon a worship of nature, the forces in nature that man could not explain to himself. If lightning struck, why, a deity had to be behind it. The sun and the moon were inhabited and ruled by superior beings, and everything that man could not explain to himself was in some way connected with the supernatural around him. To the Stone Age practitioner of the old religion, the universe was comparatively simple. Way up there someplace was the deity, but it was a female deity called the Mother Goddess. Since Stone Age man was concerned primarily with hunting and defense of his tribe, he left the more important aspects of family life to the woman. Making the home, cooking the food, having and rearing children, and ministering to the sick, all were the province of women. To this was added the relationship with the deity. No wonder then that in the thinking of Stone Age man, the deity too became female. Since he could not understand the mystery of the moon up above, he imbued the moon with the mysterious powers inherent in a female deity. That which we do not understand becomes more natural under the cover of darkness. Everything mysterious and emotional in human life is somehow connected with nocturnal feelings. Consequently, the goddess of the moon, called Diana by the Greeks and by many other names by other people, became the symbolic representation of the Mother Goddess, although the Mother Goddess was by no means a moon goddess as such. Rather was she the goddess of creation, of fertility in the sense that everything that grew on earth was ruled by her, not merely sexual aspects of humanity. In worshipping a female supreme deity, primitive man also believed in reincarnation as a basic tenet of his religion. He saw that everything in nature came back again in the spring after having died in the winter. Why should not man also, he reasoned, and reincarnation, the cycle of rebirth, became part and parcel of his religious beliefs. In fact, one of the prime hopes in witchcraft, or Wicca, was to be reborn near the loved one and to love the same person again in another life. Thus, practitioners of Wicca did not fear death. Rather, they knew he was the great pacifier who gave rest after strife, and that through him one could be reborn in another lifetime. There was no way to avoid him, and it was therefore best to make friends with him. The belief in a supreme female deity called the Mother Goddess, the belief in reincarnation, and the belief in magic were the three cornerstones of ancient witchcraft. Magic, of course, was not the stage manipulation we understand under this term today. Rather, it was the understanding of the laws of nature a little better than the average fellow. Magic was working these laws of nature to one's advantage without hurting anyone, for the law of witchcraft says, so long as it doesn't harm anyone, do what you want. In magical rituals, one tries to stimulate nature to do one's bidding. In the branch of magic called sympathetic magic, one does certain things in the hope that they will actually come true. For instance, a hunter would don the skin of a dead animal and run around a circle in the hope that a real animal will follow suit. Or getting astride a stick or broomstick and jumping as high as one could would induce the crops to grow just as high. From this simple agricultural ritual comes the superstitious belief that witches flew on broomsticks through the air. In antiquity, the broomstick signified domesticity and was symbolic of the woman's rights. No witch ever flew through the air on a broomstick. During the Middle Ages, however, it was permissible for those members of a coven or community who could not in person attend a circle or religious meeting to send their spirit bodies, even if their physical bodies had to remain home in bed. In order to do so and undertake what modern parapsychologists call astral flight or out-of-the-body experiences, they used a special ointment containing primarily certain psychedelic substances such as deadly nightshade, belladonna, and other hallucination-inducing agents. Some witches brought up on trial during the Middle Ages and forced to confess under torture actually believed that they had partaken of the Sabbath or monthly meeting in person, when in fact they had only been there in their fantasies, or at best in a spiritual out-of-the-body presence. The practitioners of the old religion led their quiet, mainly rural lives unmolested by other religions for millennia. It was only when the Roman imperial state religion came into being that persecutions set in. Until then, nobody cared what religion a man was, so long as it did not interfere with the religion of another person. But the Roman state religion was a political church in the true sense. It required that all citizens worship the emperor as a living god. Consequently, other beliefs had to be suppressed. The witches could not, in all honesty, undertake such a change, and while many of them paid lip service to the emperor service, they also continued their meetings as they had for millennia. Even more did the Christian church persecute witches on the same grounds. If they did not wish to worship the divine aspects of Jesus Christ, then they had to be destroyed. Strangely enough, however, the emerging Christian church did not pay too much attention at first and allowed the Wicca followers to exist side by side with the church-going public. Gradually, it remained for the country people to be pagans, which is what the word actually means, while the urban population became Christianized at a faster rate. Despite this uneasy truce between Christians and those still pagans, they managed to get along reasonably well for centuries. It was not until the 12th century, and especially the 13th, that the church felt uneasy about the continuing existence of another religion in its midst. This was especially disturbing to the church fathers, since the peasantry was particularly inclined to worship in the old way, often paying lip service to Christianity as well. The nobility, of course, was the pillar of the church, and the nobility, together with the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, felt that the time was at hand to come to grips with the continuing paganism of the rural population. The so-called peasant wars around 1350 gave them the final excuse to bear down hard on the worshippers of Wicca. They were accused now of having made a compact with the devil. This came as a great surprise to most of them, since they had never heard of the devil. The devil, you see, was the invention of the medieval church, when a focal point was needed to symbolize the Antichrist, the anti-church forces, the theologians, in particular the theoreticians who created the doctrinal aspects of the campaign against the pagans. The devil was born. He was concocted from various aspects and from various cultural heritages. The word devil itself means stranger in the gypsy language. His horns and the goatee the devil received from the ancient Greek cult of Pan, which is somewhat related to Wicca in that it also represents a worship of the forces of nature. Since the Greeks were largely goat herds, the goat represented a major aspect of their lives. Consequently, their god had to look like a goat. From the Phoenician Beelzebub, the newly created devil derived his fiery aspects and his man-eating qualities. All in all, he was a concoction rather than a natural creation. The name Satan was then added to this fearful figure, taken, of course, from the Old Testament. The witches did not at first know how to deal with this new threat. Since they had done nothing in contravention of political law, the only way the authorities could get at him was through religious law. At a time when church and state were practically one, this was not too difficult. Accusation of witchcraft was tantamount to conviction, and conviction equal to execution. Literally, hundreds of thousands of innocent people were burnt or put to death in other ways. Frequently, they were accused of witchcraft merely because they possessed some good piece of land or a fine house. There was no way in which an accused could defend himself, except perhaps by accusing the accuser. That, however, worked infrequently. Just as there are today a few imbeciles who try to make a living by denouncing everything in the occult sciences without having the slightest foundation to do so, so there were witch finders and other attackers in the Middle Ages, and even as late as the 16th and 17th centuries, who made a pitiful living denouncing and seeking out alleged witches by torturous methods. For every witch found, they would be paid a certain bounty. Only towards the end of the 18th century did this madness cease. In our own country, the witchcraft trials of Salem, Massachusetts are a vivid testimony to the folly of man. Not one of the people accused of witchcraft at Salem was actually a practicing witch or knew anything about it. At Salem, the hysteria started because a West Indian servant girl had been found to have ESP and being accused of devilish doings, she then named everyone she knew, thus dragging down with her some perfectly respectable citizens. In 1951, the English Witchcraft Act was repealed and it became both legally and socially possible to declare oneself a hereditary witch, if one so choose. But despite this liberalization of the official attitude towards practitioners of the old religion, there still clings a social and frequently even religious risk to the practice of witchcraft. There are today dozens of covens or communities in Western Europe and in this country. Basically, they are not hereditary covens, but people who have flocked into this new religion, which is really the world's oldest, for reasons of their own. From the large amount of calls and mail I get, I can judge that it is primarily disillusionment with establishment religions, not only Catholic but also Protestant and occasionally Jewish, that makes people look for another way to express their link with the deity. All the people who seek out witchcraft are religious people, make no mistake about it. Just as it is false to assume that witchcraft is evil and akin to black magic or voodoo, so it is false to assume that those seeking it do so because they do not believe in a deity. They do, but the deity they seek is a natural, closer one, a deity that links them up with the natural forces within themselves, and frequently without the intermediary of a minister, priest, or rabbi. What attracts people to witchcraft is its kinship with nature, with the environment, and with the ability to live a perfectly natural life, sometimes outside the confining boundaries of morality and society as we know it. Witches are not immoral or promiscuous, but they do believe that a healthy and normal expression of sexual desires is part and parcel of nature. Other religions suppress sexual instincts. Witchcraft neither suppresses nor encourages it, but allows it its proper place. A small number of people are born into witchcraft families and inherit their religion from their mothers. The majority today, however, are witches by choice. They can become actual members of a coven only by proper initiation. Self-proclaimed witches abound, but no one who has not been properly initiated into a coven or been initiated as a solitary practitioner by a third-degree or high-ranking priest or priestess can actually be called a witch. Nor do the magic powers that come with initiation work when a person has not been initiated. I have written about this in the New Pagans and elsewhere, and cannot go into the rituals here at length. There are three main streams of witchcraft, and they are all roads to the deity, one no better than the other. The Druidic form of worship, in England particularly, takes place with black robes and is primarily an intellectual approach. The traditionalists frequently also use black robes, although the true witches have always worshipped in the nude. The Gardnerian witches, named after Dr. Gerald Gardner, who was a kind of Martin Luther to the witchcraft movement in England by restoring it to its proper position in the limelight rather than underground. Also worship what they call skyclad, following in the traditions embellished by the late Dr. Gardner. The Black Mass has nothing to do with witchcraft. It is merely an anti-Catholic, perverse form of thrill-seeking ritual. Devil worship or Satanism is something else again, and Satanists are to witches what atheists are to believers. Finally, one should keep in mind that in becoming a witch, and it is not easy to become one, since the covens do not look for new members really, one does not forswear any existing religion. One merely adds a new one to one's old beliefs.